Alright, this is one I know you guys been waiting for. Motion Director. Let's get into it. So as always, I'm assuming that you've been following the tutorial series. And so I assume that your project structure is the same as mine. We want to start up our command line here. Now that we've access to the command line, we want to activate our virtual environment. We do that by doing venv/scripts/activate. And then we want to change directory into the ComfyUI directory. So we cd ComfyUI, and now we are inside the ComfyUI directory. The next most important thing is to git pull. We git pull because we want to update ComfyUI with any changes made from Comfy Anonymous, the developer. The next thing we want to do is start up ComfyUI. So we do that by doing python main.py. Once we see this link here and we have no errors, that means we're ready to launch. This is the link where ComfyUI is activated. I'm going to refresh as I already have it open, and we see that we are up and running. So the next thing we want to do is drop in our workflow from Kajai. And we see that we have a whole slew of errors, nothing to trip up about. That's why I had you guys install the manager. On the right there, we're going to click manager, install missing custom nodes, and we see that these are the 4 missing node suites that we are missing. So we're going to install each one by one. Note that you can actually go to ComfyUI's terminal or command line and see what is actually happening. Alright, now that we have everything installed, the next thing that we need to do is restart the ComfyUI server as it's directing us at the bottom here. We're going to click OK, and that is going to initiate the install for everything that we just set up in our manager. Alright, now that we have our link, we know that ComfyUI is running, we have no errors, so we're going to refresh our page and notice that everything is now up and running. Now for the most part, you don't really need to change any settings here. Kajai did a really good job at getting everything nice and set up. Now, although there are no errors, I do want us to still install one more package, which is, again, manager, install custom nodes, and we are going to search for Animatediff. And the one we are looking for is not the first one, not by ArtVenture. We are looking for the one by Kasinkadink. Remember, Kasinkadink, that's the one that we want. So it's Animatediff evolved. We'll just hit install. It should take a bit. Alright, now that that is installed, we want to restart our server as always. Okay, and now everything should be good, but we still need to make a few changes. So we're going to head into our ComfyUI directory. I have mine here. We're going to head into models, and notice that there's 2 folders, Animatediff models and Animatediff Motion Lora. So in order for Animatediff to work properly, we have to populate the Animatediff models folder with at least one Animatediff model. For the sake of time, I already have these models downloaded, so I'm just going to drag and drop, but they will be in the description down below for you guys to download. So we are going to be using specifically the V3 model for Animatediff. I'm just going to put that in here, but we also need the Lora that's associated with that. So we're going to go to our Loras directory, and I have the V3 adapter right here. Now I do want to note that you can in fact download these from the manager. If we go to the manager, install models, and we search Animatediff, you'll notice that all the Animatediff stuff pops out. So as always, we added some models into our ComfyUI, so we need to refresh our page so it's aware of those new models in its directory. If we click our motion module, we see it has access to V3, and the optional adapter Lora, we see that we now have access to that too. Make sure to click where yours is located. The next thing we need to change is our checkpoint. I don't have Dreamshaper installed. If you have it installed, you're fine, but otherwise make sure to put an SD15 checkpoint in there. That will be in the description down below as well. And the last thing we need to get this thing up and running is some footage, which I will supply you guys with the same rising drone footage that you've seen on my X account. Now that the footage is loaded, we can start this thing right up, but I'm actually going to tweak this just a bit because I like to train at square 512 by 512. You can leave it at 384 by 512 if you want though, because technically this is a wide video. But the changes that I'm going to make are that image crop. I'm going to pass this in here, and pass this in here. And because the video is 1920 by 1080, I'm going to make it 1080 on the width and 1080 tall, and I'm going to have it crop from the center. That'll give me the direct center of the video, which you will see in a moment. And just so that you can see, I'm going to drag off here and do a preview image, and that'll let us see what I'm talking about. The last thing I'm going to do is just set this at 512. Again, if you were fine with the wide footage, you could have just ran it from there. So now I'll press Q prompt. Oh, I see that my images aren't as I want them, so I'm actually going to hit cancel on the right here under running. And we're going to adjust our frames here because obviously there's not enough information to really get something good trained. So the first thing we'll do is skip some of the first few frames. Let's even maybe select every fourth frame instead of every third frame. And then we'll hit Q prompt again. I'm going to cancel one more time just so that we can review these images. So I'm just clicking through them. You know what? I don't think that's not that bad. So you know what? We'll actually run on that. So Q prompt. And our video is now loaded the way that we want. This is the footage essentially that it will be training on. Now the way that training works is, first of all, it's a lengthy process, usually about 30 minutes, and I'm running on a 4090 and a 3090 over here, so it's a lengthy process, anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour depending on your settings. And the next thing to note is that these here, so these blue nodes here, are very important. They are your steps. So the amount of steps that you train on will determine how good or bad your Motion Lora is. Now I can't necessarily say what's the best settings to train on. I will say that the settings that ComfyUI has supplied us with are very good. The 250 and the 500, they work very good. But from my extensive testing on different footage, especially drone footage, it's sort of a mixed bag in the sense of you don't necessarily know at what point your model may become overtrained or undertrained. And that's why you notice he has these increments. So this one that says 50 here, that's going to give you a model. That model is the first set of your training. And then it's going to do another 50 steps and train another Lora on that. It's going to do another 50 steps and train another Lora on that. And each stage will supply you with a Motion Lora. Now, there's two things that it actually gives you. So one is a Motion Lora, which is essentially a temporal Lora, so a Lora based on time. And the other one is a spatial Lora. That spatial Lora is just your conventional Lora, just like any other stable diffusion Lora. You don't actually have to use the spatial Lora to get things working properly. The temporal Lora is actually enough to transfer your motion over. So every time that it finishes a stage of training, it's going to run Animatediff. And it's going to run Animatediff on a new model that it trained for you. So as we can see from this model, it's kind of undertrained in the sense that there is no upward panning, which is what we want this model to give us in terms of a temporal sense. There actually are some more properties that we can change for some clarity. So for example here, this is the actual prompt that is generating the outputs here. So this is essentially right here your Animatediff configuration settings. So the generation based on the model that's output. So we have a spaceship is flying in outer space, and that's why our output looks like a spaceship flying in outer space. There's also the name of the Lora here, which I didn't rename it because I can just rename it after, so that's no big issue. So we are about to finish the second stage of our training, so another 50 steps trained on. And we see that we are still not getting much of a panning motion. Now I do want to note you do have access to these models. So if we go to the models folder, you notice there's Animatediff Motion Lora. There's a date. That date is today's date. It's the time that we started our actual generation. And we notice the name, which we have here, Dragon Camera. Again, I didn't rename it. That's my bad. But I do want to note that you can just change that after. So after it's done training, you can always tweak that. But inside there, you'll notice we have 2 Motion Lora so far, and that's because we've completed 2 stages of our Motion Lora training. And they are named appropriately, 50 and 100, because we have 50 steps here, plus another 50, which would be 100 steps. Now, remember I also said that there would be spatial loras. So these are our temporal loras, and you see that in the name here. 50 and temporal. If we go back to our models directory for ComfyUI, and we look inside the loras folder, you'll notice there's trained spatial. Today's date, the time we started our training, the name of our Lora training, and notice the same sort of structure. 50, 100, but instead of saying temporal here, it says spatial. So again, these loras are used just like regular stable diffusion loras, whereas our temporal loras are used as Animatediff Motion Loras. So we've completed another stage of our training. You'll notice that now we're starting to get a bit of that rising motion, that panning motion. And you'll also notice that we have another temporal Lora and as well as another spatial Lora. And again, 50, 100, 150, because they are associated with these blue values. 50 plus 50, 100 plus 50, 150, and the next one will then be 200. And we are about to hit another level of our training. Notice that we are now getting much more of that panning look that we want. You can feel it moving with it, which is great. This is only at 200 steps, which means that 250 might be a good value for this kind of footage. And that's what I meant about I can't necessarily give you the perfect guidelines. Certain footage works better at lower steps. Certain other footage works better at higher steps. It's a trial and error thing. All right, our Lora training has finished, the final stage. We see that it's pretty good pan. The upward pan is there. I'm happy. But there's one more stage to this network actually. It's above here. So don't get scared. It is an evaluation of your entire process. So it actually shows you how your outcome came out. I will show you where to find that in your directory as well. One moment. So we're going to head back into our directory. We see, by the way, that we have all 5 of our models, and just for the point of clarity, that we also have all 5 of our spatial models, and they're 50, 100, 150, 200, 250, and that inside of our output, we can actually see each evaluation stage and the overall grid that we made that lets us see how things came out. We can also look at the individual footage for some more clarity. So this is a very, very quick and dirty rundown of how Motion Director and ComfyUI works. Tomorrow I will make a follow-up video showing you how to actually use your Motion Loras with Animatediff and how to evaluate them yourself so you can see whether it's usable or not, and how to push something that you may think is not usable. So, blessings. I hope this was good.